Here we go. Charlotte, John, welcome back to the podcast. How are we doing?
Good.
Awesome,
Thanks for
thank
having
you.
us back.
Definitely, it's good to be back. Yep.
I had you both on separately before, and now you guys are back in the UK. I did a podcast with you last month sometime, and I'm kind of piggybacking off one of the podcasts I heard you do about the myth of self-sabotage. So I thought it'd be great to pull you guys both on together to kind of talk about that. But how's your move back to the UK been?
Nice. Yeah, it's been good. It's always a bit of adjusting, isn't it? Coming back, especially from the nice hot weather of sunny Dubai. But it's nice. It's great to be back with friends and family, a bit of fresh air, some real nice nature. We're enjoying it, really.
Enjoying the greenery.
Yeah, awesome. So for those that don't know, Charlotte was episode number 19, John was episode number 22. Go back and have a listen to them for, I guess, a prerequisite on kind of who they are. I'll get you to do a little bit of an introduction now, just a brief one, and then we'll get into the myth of self-sabotage and we can go from there. So do you want to just give yourself a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Jonathan, this is Charlotte, and we obviously are like the wellness theory, and it's our company we created, and it's a kind of online education and coaching business, and the whole point of it is to help people kind of go from a stressful to stress-free life, integrating every aspect of wellness, from obviously the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual as well.
Yeah, we started Wellness Theory just because we just saw such a gap where a lot of people just honing in on one element of wellness, whether that's like physical, like trying to lose weight, trying to recover from an injury. But then there was so many kind of like mental and emotional attachments to those goals that people were just only taking care of one element, and there just wasn't enough for people to get the long lasting changes that they actually wanted. So we thought we would go all in with everything and deliver something that not many people were really delivering, I'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously I met you guys through working in the fitness industry. So primarily fitness was your game, and obviously through your own experiences with your own health and fitness and what you kind of learned from there, I guess is the position that you've got to now.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a eye-opener. Like I say, that our whole pretty much experience over the last 2 decades has been focusing on like the physical, of obviously eating healthy, exercising regularly, sleeping well, all this sort of stuff. And there was always that missing gap for us. We both felt it, and it took us a while to get to the point of realizing that it's, like we say, it's not just, you can't just place 100% focus on eating healthy and exercising. You've got to look after what's going on mentally. You've got to look after your emotions. You've got to be able to understand what you're feeling, how you're thinking, and obviously how to manage kind of these things that come up. And one of the major things we found that affects all areas for us is, well, for everyone, is stress. And it has a big impact on the way we think, the way we feel, the way we move, the way we eat. So that's why we kind of hone in on helping people eliminate stress, whether it be physical, mental, or emotional, to pretty much get to that point of living a stress-free life and actually being able to achieve, well, anything that they want to achieve, really.
Stress is normally the one factor that is the difference between somebody not only getting a result but keeping it as well. And that's where we obviously saw the gap in, is this yo-yo effect that everybody goes through, and it is natural. Like, we're supposed to fluctuate a little bit, we're not supposed to be the same all the time, but that need for lasting change, so you don't feel like you're going back to square one every time, that was the bit that we just know was a pain point for a lot of people. And I'm sure people listening have experienced that themselves. And when you do start to master all the elements that John's just mentioned, it's a lot easier to do that, and it becomes more effortless because you just start living in a very aligned way of life. And I've heard you say before, it's about the lifestyle change, not just like the workout and all that kind of stuff. And it's so true.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And lifestyle, you see it, it's kind of turned into a buzzword, hasn't it, over the last 5 or 6 years in the fitness industry. Like, everybody is, teaching lifestyle, which is great. Like, people are starting to hone in, whether they're doing that in the right frame or they're actually doing it at all and they're just putting it on their Instagram bio or something like that. But it's interesting you said about like the yo-yo dieting, and as a coach working with people on a day-to-day basis, even when someone has made that initial investment, whether it's financially, morally, whatever they've done to go and get a coach, they're still going to go through those stages of, yo-yo, diet, overeat, repeat, that type of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like, again, that's where that whole lasting change comes in, is like, there's so many tips and tricks and tools out there. And we can give quick fixes, like do this and you're going to be stress-free for a short while. Do this and you're going to feel better for a short while. But the goal is obviously that lasting change. So it's like, put the work in now and do it now. So in 30, 40, 50, 60 years, you're still going to be stress-free, pain-free, living the life that you want, and not keep going, like Charlotte said, on that hamster wheel, trying something, feeling better, going back to square one, and trying something else, feeling better, going back to square one, and just keep going around and around for the rest of your life, feeling crap, feeling good, getting high, low, high, like literally on a roller coaster.
Like you said, like yo-yo dieting as well, but there's a massive yo-yo mindset going on behind that. And that's something like that you can see in the all or nothing mentality, right? Or that yo-yo effect of Monday morning comes or Sunday morning comes, and that's when I'm going to kick off again, right? That's another example of just yo-yoing, just in a different kind of dimension, really, of thinking. And it's something that's affecting everybody on some level, whether it's their diet, their training, their career, their relationships. And, it just gets to a point where, a lot of people start thinking, well, that's not okay. That's not how I want to be living. And then they get kind of a bit frustrated. And then things like self-sabotage pop into the mix. And now there's a new problem to solve.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think on a day-to-day basis, when I'm talking to people about like nutrition and things like that, and you talk about, if you do have something that's high in sugar, not necessarily a bad thing, but remember, you're going to go through this like peak where you're going to have loads of energy, and then you're going to go through this trough. And then, trying to teach people to just perhaps stay at that same level throughout the day, knowing that if they are going to go through the peaks, they're going to get the troughs. And you're just taking that on like an even more holistic approach and taking it from the whole mindset side of it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the bit that we've found is that difference. Like we said earlier, that is the difference between people either staying on track with what it is they're after, or really going after what they want and then some more. And they feel like they're at a stage where they can do that, versus kind of getting one result, going back 2 steps forward, 1 step back, whatever that saying is.
So before we get into more like in depth on the self-sabotage, the all or nothing approach that we've mentioned, who's to blame? Like, why is this all or nothing approach around? Like, why does it happen to us?
I think, you want me to say that one?
You say that one, you start that one.
So I think it obviously always comes back. I'll come back to it more on a psychological kind of standpoint here. And it's because it's what we've learned, right? Everything that we experience is something we've learned or been exposed to. Because some people don't have the all or nothing mindset, right? Some people just genuinely don't even know what that feels like. But it's just that I think more of us have probably been conditioned and been exposed to that all or nothing mindset. And it comes down to, obviously, the way families are brought up. It comes down to the way society kind of shows things to us as well. We see it all the time. Like, look at like when the holidays come and Christmas comes, marketing companies just ramp up everything. Then it goes away again. Now it's let's be healthy again. Like that all or nothing is been drummed into us in so many different ways. And I think our lack of understanding of ourselves really makes us vulnerable to being able to do something about it. And that's where I think the all or nothing mentality then sticks, because we kind of accept it. And then again, that's where it's not okay if you want something different.
Yeah, definitely. It's like it is learned from society, our parents and media, all this stuff around us. We get susceptible to it, but like Charlotte said, is if you're not aware of it and you're susceptible and you're vulnerable to it, that's what you're going to latch onto. So as much as we can blame marketing companies, the media, our parents, and everything else for what we've learned, at the end of the day, it's still our responsibility to become aware and then change those learnings to suit what we want. So you can blame everyone else around you, but it still comes back down to us as an individual to say, okay, I don't want this. I need to now become more aware and with who I am and what I want, and then go after and change that whole concept of all or nothing. And if you look at all the people who are successful in that realm where they're not all or nothing, they don't just think, okay, it has to be this way or this way. They all have a much deeper awareness of themselves, really, and exactly what they want. So they're not, then they don't become vulnerable and influenced by what's going on in the mass, in society. So they don't latch onto it and it doesn't stick.
I think it really comes down to our perception, and a really good example of this is we can perceive something as all or nothing, or we can attach a different perception that's actually going to help us. And a good example of this is when we start thinking about things in terms of navigation and acceleration. So we've got moments where we need to navigate and figure out maybe what that next move is. It doesn't equate to nothing, which obviously in that old frame of reference of all or nothing exists. But you can have those moments where you're navigating, figuring it out, and then you go into acceleration mode, but you're prepared, you know why, you're aligned and you're focused, and you know exactly how it needs to play out. And again, you then don't have that all or nothing association thinking, well, if I'm not doing everything, then it's not enough, right? And then that plays a whole different kind of mental trick on you, which leads to different kind of behaviors.
I think with the podcast I did with you guys last month, we kind of touched on that as well. And I mentioned the on-off switch of the standby mode. And I guess it kind of ties into that as well. And it's, for me, working with someone, if they make the decision that they want to come work with myself or work with another coach because in 12 weeks time or in 6 months time, they've got a big occasion, that's not the issue for me. Like, I actually think embrace that wave of motivation that's coming around. You know, you're doing it in the right way. You're getting advice, you're getting the, you know, the accountability, the assistance. But it's always what happens after that, which worries me. And I always try to do it within my own coaching. I know a lot of other coaches do it as well. Try and bring people back down to like what I call that standby. And I like what you said, Charlotte, about like navigating. Hey, you can still make progress in this position here, but your life might be, no, you're not going to be as restrictive as you were before. You know, you're not going to be saying no to social occasions and, you know, dieting hard and that type of stuff, but that's okay. But the switch doesn't go off and you don't go back to, you know, all of the bad habits that you know are obviously sabotaging, or maybe not after this podcast, but all of those things that are, you know, aren't necessarily good for you, and just be happy in a position that you've learned how to, you know, push on a little bit when you've got the motivation, the time, all of that type of stuff. And you're good at kind of just living your natural life.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're completely on point, and that's where I think what John mentioned earlier about self-awareness is like the biggest thing. Like, that's already the biggest thing anyone could take away just from listening to this episode, is that level of self-awareness that you can see when you're switching off completely or when you're switching on. Like, what does that navigation period look like for you, and start to actually picture it and understand that in detail, because that's the difference again from somebody actually adopting that new perception of having an on-off switch, or this all or nothing, or navigation acceleration, whatever you want to call it. They've got to nail that and get that definition and perception clear in their own minds, and then they can execute on it easily.
So what about, let's go into the myth of self-sabotage then. Like, I listened to your podcast. You guys did a really good job on explaining this. Do you want to explain to the listeners now the myth behind self-sabotage?
Well, the myth of self-sabotage is the fact that it doesn't exist in the traditional terms of self-sabotage. Like, you're not self-sabotaging. The word in itself is a bit, what's the word? Disempowering. Because you're saying like, I'm sabotaging myself. I'm a self-saboteur. I said, you're not. I said, you're not a self-saboteur. What you're doing is you are basically just not taking responsibility for what's happening and what's going on in front of you.
It's so easy to get sucked into that. And when I did my podcast with you, Joff, we spoke a lot about personal responsibility. So I'll let the listeners listen to that one for us to kind of go off in that direction with self-sabotage. But the thing with self-sabotage is we label it, right? We're giving it a name. It's like giving the name to the monster under the bed, right? The boogeyman in the dark. The minute you give it a name, it becomes this thing. It becomes scary. There becomes emotion attached to this thing. And like John mentioned there, like, the word in itself is just setting you up for failure, because we're even saying it's self-sabotage. The most important thing to anybody is their identity, right? Whether they'll ever admit that or not is a different story, but our identity is the thing that is most important to us, right? It's the thing that everybody resonates with themselves on a deep level. And the minute that becomes threatened, or the minute we start to believe this thing about ourselves, then we own it. And when we then own it, whoa, you try taking that away from me. It's like right now, let's say somebody's listening to this on their phone, and they drop their phone, and they tell their friend about it. Their friend will be like, oh, that sucks, your phone broke. But they wouldn't really feel that emotional about it, right? It's their friend's phone that broke. But if it was your phone that broke, it's your life that's on that phone, right? It's your contacts, it's your messages, your photos, all the rest of it. You have an emotional attachment to that thing. And people are identifying with self-sabotage as their thing in the same way they get upset if they break their phone. They're getting upset that their identity is now being threatened, but yet they're doing it to themselves by claiming this label and this title of self-sabotage. It's just almost setting them up for failure in the first place the minute they buy into this thing even existing.
Yeah, and I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people, and it definitely resonated with me then. Accepting there is a thing, like on a Thursday here, if you go and have a few too many drinks on a Thursday evening, right, that's your weekend done now. You've sabotaged your weekend. You've accepted it. You're just making an excuse for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with anything. If you go to the supermarket tired and hungry, and all you can think about is chocolates and cakes and sweets, and then you just give in and take it on. You go, oh, I've just sabotaged my day or my week, or I'll sabotage my training. Or instead of going to the gym, I decide to watch Netflix instead. I just sabotage myself. So no, you just made a very poor decision right there. I said, so obviously what you want is not as strong as what you're doing right now. So what you're doing, obviously in some form or another, you want that more, and you want to actually go to the gym, or you want to be healthy. I say it's nothing to do with self-sabotaging. You're not sabotaging anything. You're just making poor choices. And one of the, I think, easiest ways to relate, which I think a lot of people can relate, is when they go food shopping. How many times have you been food shopping when you're tired, or you're hungry, or you're annoyed? By the time you get there, and all you can think about is, want to think about is fruit and vegetables and like nutritious foods. Or your mind's thinking, okay, where's the chocolate aisle? Where's the crisp cakes? And that's all you care about. But if you go in and you're in a more relaxed, resourceful state, you're calm, you've had a good night's sleep, you've had a good breakfast, you go shopping, and none of that enters your head. You go around the supermarket, you know what you want to get. You go, okay, I need to get my fruits, I need to get my veg, I need to get this, I need to get that. And you can easily bypass those temptations, so you don't make those poor decisions. But the funny thing is when we do go in and we get those so-called, they do those poor choices, there's always a term, self-sabotaging. There's a term for the bad stuff we do. But if we go into the supermarket and we get all the good stuff, what's the term for that? No one. Where's the title for that? Was it like self-helping or something? I don't know. But
well, yeah, I wanna build on that one, because I listened to a Ben Kuma podcast, and they talk about self-love, and they actually talk about, but they say, finish work, have a glass of wine, have a bath, order some takeaway. That's known in society as like self-love, when in reality that is actually not loving yourself. If we're looking on the grand scheme of things, you're actually, loving yourself would be going and doing a workout, going home and having a nice home cooked dinner with plenty of vegetables, drinking loads of water, that type of stuff. So it's interesting that you brought that up then.
It's coming back to, again, what is your association with it? It's funny you say that, because there was a client of mine fairly recently, they sent me a accountability update thing, and they said, oh, I did really well a week, and then I treated myself with a McDonald's. And I was like, I'm not going to let that slide. I was like, we need to get to understanding here that actually McDonald's is actually more of a punishment for your body, right? Mentally, because you've got the happy meal attachment or whatever it is, doesn't make it a treat, right? It's that understanding of what are you putting into your system, like what do you deem as a treat, like, because actually you're really abusing yourself more so by doing that. And this isn't a McDonald's bash necessarily, that's a podcast for another day, but I think it's really important that people start to define and understand what they mean by self-love and what those behaviors actually look like, and bring it back to kind of self-sabotage. That's what we're really saying when we say it's a myth, is that you don't have to buy into it, but what you do need to buy into is your response to the awareness of your behaviors, because when you do that, then you get to influence them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And without going into like too much detail on how you might approach that from what you do with the wellness theory, like your coaching and stuff like that, what is kind of like the starting process for literally that, what you've just mentioned there about McDonald's being what someone's celebration is? How do you coach that out with people? I'm guessing time is a big factor.
It is a big factor, but in the sense of how long it takes to educate somebody, because it's more around their willingness to make different decisions about what they think. And you can do that in an instant if you want to. Somebody can walk away from listening to this podcast having passed 30 minutes and have a completely different frame of reference for how they think about this. And the best place to start with that is just questioning, okay, why is this a treat for me? Why am I thinking this is self-love for me? All right, and then helping them to really understand those perceptions, because basically when it comes to our results, there's a few things that lead to those results, isn't it? There's the result in that scenario is that somebody thinks that McDonald's is a treat, right? That's the result in the end. But the thing that's driving that result is a behavior, right? The behavior, they know it's a treat because they know how they're going to feel when they have it, right? And that's that little dopamine hit when they have it. Take away the negative side of like the bloating and the digestion and all that kind of stuff, but that's the behavior is driving the result. The thing that's driving the behavior is what's most important here at this point, because a lot of coaches, they tend to just try and change the behavior. Okay, instead treat yourself with a healthier option. So it doesn't have to be McDonald's, it can be something else. So they try and change the behavior. But the problem is that's where that yo-yoing occurs, because you can't control all of your behaviors all of the time unless you've figured out the other stuff. So the question then becomes like, what is driving the behaviors in the first place? John's already mentioned this when he talked about states, right? Walking around the supermarket or even being in a state where you feel like you need a treat, right? That's a state. You're in a state of mind. Your body is in a physical state where it's craving or wanting. Right, so that state then drives the behavior, but it doesn't stop there. You've got to ask then the question, okay, well, what's driving those states in the first place? Okay, because if you're thinking about what is driving these states, because then I get to change my states, we then get different behaviors which produce different results, different thought patterns, different physical behaviors, everything. But the thing behind the states themselves is our conditioning. Right, all the things we've learned up until this point, like we went back to earlier when you said, like, where does it come from? It comes from our conditioning. It comes from that thing that is actually at the starting point that creates this ripple effect of thoughts and behaviors. And the thing is, when we tap into that conditioning and start thinking about the meanings we're attaching and thinking about what's really driving us and to make sure we're really aligned, then you get to make the changes. So kind of to answer your question on a big picture, you need to go to your conditioning. You can dabble in changing your state, like psyching yourself up before you go for a workout, or having a good night's sleep, or having a healthy meal before you go to the supermarket. They're going to help to manage your states, which is a good place to start if somebody's brand new. Because what a lot of people tend to do, the biggest mistake they make when it comes to self-sabotage is they're like, okay, well, I need a better routine, or I need a new habit, right? I need to manage my time better. And actually, they're still dabbling in the behaviors. They're not even thinking about their state at that point. So just like the starting point is bring it back a step. Start managing your state instead of your time and your actions. Manage how you feel, and then you're more likely to get better behaviors. But for those people that want to dig deeper, they've got to go to their conditioning. They've got to start to understand what are these behaviors representing for them on a deeper level.
I think that's super interesting. And like John mentioned earlier with the state, the supermarket, every time you mentioned an example that I was thinking, like I can relate to that. And I think one of like the really obvious ones is like, how many people actually enjoy going to the cinema to watch the film? Or do they just enjoy that they're going to go and have a big box of popcorn and a fizzy drink, or people like that idea, like, and I'm actually the same with going to the shopping mall. Like, I hate going to the mall. Like, I don't shop. I hate doing things like that. But if it's just Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, and Grace wants to go to the mall, like, and it's like early afternoon, in my head I'm already thinking that probably means that we're going to go to like Cheesecake Factory or like PF Chang's or something like that, and like I'm putting myself in that state, and then we're here now, we might as well do that.
Exactly. And this is so true. And like one of the the kind of most unresourceful states that most people spend most of the time in is a stressful state. Like they're constantly in a state of stress because they don't sleep well, they don't eat well, they tend to use McDonald's and stuff as a treat, so that has obviously kind of a stressful effect on the body. Then they go to work, to a job they don't enjoy, they add more stress, and it just compounds the effect, and they stay in this state so much. So when you're in that state, you don't think resourcefully, you don't make good decisions. And what happens is, because you're in that unresourceful state, when you come to your behaviors, that comes back to your conditioning and what you believe is a treat. So I feel like crap today, I had a bad day at work, or had a hard week at work, I'm going to treat myself with a few glasses of wine and watch I'm going to binge watch a series on Netflix the whole day. And while that sounds good in like the outside, well, that sounds quite relaxing, that is not self-love. That is very, very, that's like damaging to the body. Like you see, you're not moving all day. You're adding obviously a toxic element into what you're doing. You're probably going to, around that point, think, okay, I think I need to snack now. So get some bag of Doritos, going to get some cookies, and then it just compounds that effect. And while it might, again, like Charlotte said, get that dopamine hit where you feel good initially, what's happening internally is everything is going, it's like chaos inside.
You're reinforcing that conditioning.
Yeah.
Like when you go to the mall and you're already thinking mall, Cheesecake Factory or something, you're immediately going into your conditioning and pulling up that memory of the mall, thinking, how can I make this more enjoyable? Because you've already just said there that actually shopping, it doesn't really float your boat, right? So you're going to create like almost a reward for going in a sense, because that's what your subconscious has decided a long time ago it kind of needs to do. But actually, you don't need to do that. Like if you didn't want to, and we're not saying it's a bad thing. Like if you want to, then that's fine. But if some people fall into that trap of thinking that's a self-sabotaging behavior, and when they go to the mall, they have to have a Cheesecake Factory, or in my case, it was, or if I go into the mall, then I can have a hot chocolate, right? and it's that whole notion. It's like by the end of the week, how many times have you been to the mall? How many hot chocolates have you had? And my training's out the window. Right? Do you know what I mean? So you've got to make sure the conditioning is just aligned with what it is you're actually trying to achieve, and then you don't have to kind of worry too much about the stuff in between. But let me ask you this, Joff, that when you say like to yourself, okay, maybe we'll go to Cheesecake Factory or whatever, does that actually give you the state that you want to go?
No, like I'm going anyway. Like I don't have a choice in the matter. So I think I try to make the best of a bad situation for myself. I think I just naturally,
making the best, that's you making a state.
Yeah.
Trying to make the best of the situation is you doing it, and what drives you into action, obviously, than other than Grace, like giving you the elbow to make sure you go. But I
almost feel like this is my own coaching session with you. No, but I guess it goes like that was just to give practical examples. And people always meant, like when I do these podcasts, people always say to me about practical examples that I've given, and they can relate to that. So I think it's always important. And I'm not here to stand up as a stand-up health and fitness professional or anything like that. I enjoy things like that. I go out drinking and eat Cheesecake Factory, those types of things as well. But I think what you touched on there about the state that you're in, and I guess just being conscious of the fact of what you're doing, that there is something that you can change there. It doesn't just happen. There is something you can change. And it might be that your motivation changes, and you have higher motivation some days, some weeks, some months than others, that actually affects that decision. But what you're saying is that everything will perhaps come back to where your conscious is.
Yeah, absolutely. Because motivation isn't something that kind of just shows up some days and not other days. It shows up when you're aligned with what it is you want. You actually generate that by aligning yourself with what it is you actually want, right? So motivation is a state, and we create states.
And I'll give you a good example of that. Like this morning, last night I didn't have a great night's sleep. So I woke up this morning 6 o'clock, and my first thought was I could stay in bed. Like I want to stay in bed. And I thought, no, we're going to get up. Obviously do my meditations, do my movements. And one thing obviously that we do, that's a lot of people who follow us know now, we do ice baths in the morning. And it was chucking down with rain this morning at 6 o'clock. I mean, like completely chucking it down. And I looked outside, I thought, do I want to do this morning? I thought I could easily go back to bed. My eyes are telling me, go back to bed. And then I thought, no, okay, obviously, because again, it's something I know it's good for me. It's aligned with what I'm obviously doing. So I just think, okay, no, I know I need to do it. It's good for me. I'm going to go do it. So my state went from, I'm tired, I want to go back to bed, to go, no, okay, I'm going to now change that. I'm going to go do it. I've done it, feel great for doing it. And actually, while doing it, in an ice bath, rain pouring down, felt amazing. It felt really good. And then afterwards, it's just like, it changes that, just that little flip and going after that changed the whole state for the rest of the day. So instead of feeling tired and I don't want to do anything, is now again revitalizes your energy, you feel great, and you just, again, you're aligned, and now you're more productive and actually want to do things.
It was the quality of his thinking that changed his state.
Yeah.
To move into action, to then now feel how you feel.
Exactly.
And I guess in a roundabout way, it's kind of like, what's that quote where it's, when you do something in the morning, that'll be the toughest part of your day. So then the rest of the day will feel easy. I guess it's kind of getting into that mindset as well.
Yeah, it is, but I think it comes to that. It also comes in like what you said, what people say, oh, it's the toughest part. Now they're already putting that mentality into it. So they're waking up thinking, oh, this is the toughest part of my day. So now they're in a state of thinking, this is going to be hard.
That will work if somebody likes a challenge.
Yeah.
But when they're already in that state, when they wake up in the morning, they're not even probably thinking about, oh, I need a good challenge right now. They're waking up thinking the stuff that John was thinking this morning about, like, oh, I'm tired, I'm not feeling great. But that in a sense, yeah, it's good, like, to start there, but that's again still scratching the surface level of trying to change a daily habit or a daily thought, which is good, and it's a good starting point. But if somebody's really, really struggling with self-sabotage to a point where they're just hitting a wall and they can't get past it and they're really feeling bad about themselves, they've got to start to understand that self-sabotage is coming from a very different place. It's coming from a complete misalignment of their values, of what's important to them and their goals, and having a clear picture of what that looks like. It's coming from a disrupted belief system because there's something else going on under the surface of, well, if I do achieve this, what does that mean about me? Maybe there's a fear of succeeding there somehow. Maybe there's something they're gaining from not doing it that is more like bolder than somebody that would do it. Maybe there's underlying beliefs there that they can't do it and they don't have the skill sets for it. But it's also coming from sometimes a misplacement of emotions as well. It's like you said about somebody going to the cinema, right? Some people go to the cinema for the movie, they genuinely do, and that's what they're fulfilling at that point, is that growth or that escapism or whatever. But some people are going because all they're thinking about is the fizzy drink and the popcorn, because that's fulfilling a different emotional need. And again, when somebody's not aware of what's really going on under the surface, these are just little symptoms that are kind of showing up, and then they're not going to push through it. So for long-term change, when it comes to self-sabotage, you've got to look under the hood and start to understand what is going on underneath the surface. Otherwise, that yo-yo that we spoke about at the beginning is highly likely to rear its ugly head at some point.
So the funny thing is, most people, like, that bit there for most people is uncomfortable. So to look into the self-sabotage on that level becomes very uncomfortable for most people. So what do they do when they become uncomfortable? They revert back to what they know and they don't do it, and then they just try to force behavior change. And like what you said, like, is okay, I know I shouldn't have this, I'm gonna force myself to have something else instead. So they just they force behavior change, and they're now forcing themselves to do something that their conditioning wants to do the opposite. So now it's a battle, and this is where that struggle and that is hard comes in, because again, like Charlotte said, they're not aligned with what they want. The conditioning seeing something, they're forcing themselves to do something else instead of looking at the conditioning in the first place. So it's just that's why people find this whole self-sabotage or doing anything like lasting change hard or uncomfortable when it doesn't need to be.
It creates internal conflicts, and whenever somebody's got an internal conflict of a simple example, like, should I stay or should I go, whether that's to the gym, to work, change the country, like whatever, whenever we've got something that's just kind of pulling us in two different directions, you get stuck, right? You can't move anymore because you're just butting heads, and that's where people then don't progress and move forward and build the momentum that they need.
That's brilliant. And I was actually going to wrap it up and ask you about just some kind of practical tips and, you know, what is holding people back. But I kind of think you just answered that then before I got to it. So I'm really happy with that. Now, tell us a little bit more about, just as we wrap up, the wellness theory, about what you do with obviously the whole holistic approach.
Yeah, cool. So basically we have a few different tracks people can go down, right? We obviously have the coaching option, is where somebody will work with us. And to work with us, they would need to obviously like almost apply, and they would need to kind of obviously share what they're experiencing. That might mean that they work predominantly with myself or with Jonathan. We have a lot of clients that obviously coach with both of us as well, depending on what they're obviously trying to achieve and overcome. But we also have the online courses, which is a different route where people can go down if they're having real specific kind of issues when it comes to certain things. For example, if mindset is something that they know they're struggling with, maybe they've got their training and their health is feeling okay, but they're constantly thinking negatively all the time. They're constantly stressed out. They're constantly overthinking, thinking that everything they do is not enough. We get a lot of high performers and achievers that come to us and they're almost like chasing their tail and they're trying to get to that next level, but they keep hitting a roof because there's some mental blocks going on. So we've got a track for that, a course for that. We've got another one for emotions as well. Yeah. So anybody that might have resonated when we was talking about like feeling a certain way and struggling to get into certain states, or they're feeling really overwhelmed, that can be from like anxiety, or it could just be feeling like super stressed, like John mentioned. That just is a signal that people are not necessarily aligning with what their heart and their mind, and having that open channel of communication, and the effect that that's having on their health, they're usually very unaware of, except for the problems it's causing them. But there's very, very simple solutions, and they can find that as well. We've got other courses as well, which is all around like energy centers and tapping into your internal energy. And then obviously the body mastery side of it is where we're tapping into health, generally speaking. And so people can sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed by trying to do everything at once. We've broken it down so they've got an option where they can home in on the thing that they're struggling with the most, and then they can build from there.
Yeah, and I think if people listen to this podcast, and they obviously, I think you both really explain things well, because it can be quite complicated, that type of stuff, and it takes a certain mindset to like buy into things like that. Like a lot of people just want to hear, because of like clickbait in the media, people just want quick fixes all the time. So if people are still listening to this and they enjoy this content, definitely recommend going and listening to both your podcasts. Charlotte, yours is actually like, I think the third most listened to out of all my podcasts, episode number 19. So that was a very popular one. And John 22 as well. But before we go, obviously you explained the wellness theory there. Where can they find you guys?
Well, we're on Instagram at Wellness Theory. Also, you spend a lot of time on there, so you can always message us on there. Facebook, The Wellness Theory, and also our website, thewellnesstheory.com. So literally any of those avenues, you can reach out to us at any time. And we've got, like, on all of our pages, a lot of free valuable educational content, resources people can use. Because again, our whole concept is about giving back and providing as much value as possible, so people can actually try, pretty much like it's try before you buy type of thing. So they can see exactly what we do, try our methods for themselves, to see if obviously they feel like they fit with us.
Something else is, if they go over to wellnesstheory.com, is they can take our quiz as well. It's a free quiz where they can almost do like a bit of an assessment, and they can see how they're faring when it comes to those 4 elements of wellness, which is like mind, heart, body, soul. So they will actually get almost a score saying, okay, physical health is going well, body is doing good, but we need some attention over in the mental wellness side of things, for example. And that's always a nice eye-opener for people. So anyone's welcome to obviously head over to thewellnesstheory.com and do that.
Perfect. Well, I'm not going to take any more of your time. I am almost certain our paths are going to cross again on the podcast, even though we're not in the same country anymore. But thanks again for coming on today.
Thank you for having us. It's always great to have a chat with you, Josh. Super aligned, and I really enjoy our conversations.
Perfect. Thanks very much, guys.